Welcome to Mastering Your World Through Frequencies. In this episode, there's an introduction, an interview, and most importantly, at the end, a group frequency calibration where the frequency work happens and change is catalyzed. Enjoy. Hi, everyone. This is Cheong, and I'm here with my co-host, Tia. Whether it's ancient knowledge or simply a time in life where things seem simpler and therefore better, it's really common for people to have a reverence for things past. This sentiment becomes even more common or stronger in times of change or uncertainty. What is this dynamic of the yearning for or elevation of the past? Today we discuss what glorifying the past is really all about and how to empower your present to rewrite your future. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part of this episode. The group frequency calibration at the end is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So be sure to listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. So let's get started.
So, Karen, a lot of us tend to hold a lot of reverence for the past and can kind of get stuck there. Why do you think this happens?
Yeah, so there's two phenomena, I should say, that happen with regards to the past. So one that I've noticed, they're kind of the same actually, but they show up in different ways. So one tends to be sort of like a spiritual thing, where there's a reverence for like an ancient culture or like a mysticism from a time. So like the ancient Mayans or the ancient Tibetans or Egyptians or Hawaiians or whomever, okay? So there's that. And then there's something a little bit more mundane. So in our, like this lifetime, you know, a time that was simpler, or a time where we were happy, or a time where, I don't know, something good was happening. And then we tend to like spin into that time and like attach to it. And we want kind of everything to be like that time, or we always reference that as the good old days, right? And it's funny because typically I found that happens when there's something happening in our present that we don't like, or we don't want to face, or that we don't want to be with. So what we do is instead of being like, okay, I'm going to meet my present with the sovereignty of myself as a co-creator, I'm going to instead, because I don't realize I have that power, I'm going to like focus on this other thing back here that happened when it was like the glory days. But it's funny, you know, those glory days weren't always that glorious, right? So we have this like little sliver of like, you know, I don't know, I guess like the typical thing would be like when you were like this is very American, so I'm Canadian, so it's hard for me to reference, but like when you were the captain of the football team or whatever it was, that's supposed to be cool, right? A head cheerleader, popular, whatever, like I don't know what the thing is, but whatever that thing is, you know, when like people are at the pinnacle of their popularity and being loved and all this sort of stuff, they think, okay, well that time was spectacular. But if you really remember that time, you know, so they see it through the lens of like when I was that was my pinnacle and my life was amazing. But also at that life, perhaps you also, despite being well loved, you felt like you weren't worthy. Your grades were suffering. You were in a relationship with your high school sweetheart and it wasn't going so well, or whatever. But we don't necessarily remember all that stuff. You know, we remember like the little sliver of like glory, right? And then we amplify that, right? And so I think that's the trouble with sitting in the past, is that we don't come into the present.
It's not quite accurate.
Yeah, it's not accurate.
Yeah, we do tend to romanticize the good times and
totally
blow it out of proportion.
Yeah, exactly. And then we can sit there for too long. And it's not, you almost like create like a fantasy, right, of that past as opposed to being in the present, which is where you're more empowered to co-create your reality.
Right. I think there was like some statistic that actually whatever percentage of our memory isn't quite accurate.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's 50%.
Yeah, it's a pretty large number.
Yeah. And which is kind of interesting because like we either make it up or fill it in, and so it didn't actually happen the way we remember it, which is kind of amazing if we think about it and when we embellish it. And it's you know, it's the same when people revere ancient traditions, like, you know, the ancient Mayans, the Tibetans, or whatever. And so the thing is about those cultures and those times is that a lot of those ancient civilizations, where they had a lot of you know, spiritual advancement, there are definitely things we can learn from those civilizations and those particular traditions. Absolutely, there's wisdom there. But we have to also remember that consciousness continues to rise. And there's a lot to take advantage of now, okay? So my point simply is to always whenever you're being taught anything, okay, whether it's like from some ancient tradition or now or whatever, is to scan it against yourself and see, does it resonate with me? What can I learn from this system, from this teaching, from whatever, that resonates with me, that will propel me forward? And then use what it is that propels you forward and leave the rest. Because I've noticed that in the spiritual community, there's like, oh, like the ancient Mayans did all this stuff, so everything they did was amazing. And like, you know what I mean? Like they give the power away to this like ancient teaching. I'm like, okay. In that civilization at the time, there was slavery. There wasn't exactly equality amongst all the people. You know, so the consciousness level was at a certain level. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there is not wisdom to be gained. There is from these different traditions, absolutely. But my point is the consciousness of the time wasn't like that evolved. You see what I'm saying?
Right, and the key point I think is to give your power away to this time or time in your life or time in history.
Yeah.
That putting it on this major pedestal and you're missing the present.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your point. Yeah.
Yeah, and also there are people who teach, like, you know, they have like, you know, from this particular time, right? Whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. And then all of a sudden they become like the access point to this ancient tradition, this ancient wisdom. And then that can happen too, where people will give their power away to that person because they have this access to this knowledge. So my point is, learn from who you feel resonant with. And that's wonderful. And whoever it is, whether it's me, someone else, it doesn't matter. Take what resonates with you, which will catalyze you forward, that like, you know, that you're like, yes, that's true for me. But not everything is going to be true for you necessarily, right? So just assess against yourself, like what really is true for you. Watch your power. Are you just handing it over to someone else? Or are you assessing, like, is this good for me? Is this relevant for me? Can I learn from this? All that sort of thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you're talking about your internal compass and getting clear on that. And I think that's actually what frequency work also does.
Yeah.
As like a little side note. Maybe you're doing it for something else, but it actually does help to hone and clarify your inner compass.
Yeah, totally. Because as you release your distortion patterns, it clarifies who you are and your ability just to discern things that are more in alignment with you. And the wonderful thing about frequency work is that practitioners who use it, so for example, you're an acupuncturist, which is a very ancient tradition, okay? A very old science. Okay? It also, you do a form of acupuncture that's esoteric in the sense that it has some magic to it, you know? And so it's a very specific branch, you know, 5 elements. And so the thing is, the more you clarify from doing frequency work, the more potent that particular aspect of acupuncture becomes, because it's coming through you, which is of a higher resonance order. And so therefore what you practice is going to be of a higher resonance. So you can like bring the best forward from the tradition that you are embodying or teaching or practicing or whatever it is. So yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, and I know my partner Blake, he's a yoga teacher. And even through him doing the frequency work, he's noticed just his teaching becoming more, I guess you could say, like I've said before, solid in yourself. Yeah, so whatever it is that you do,
it doesn't matter.
It just becomes amplified in its clarity. Yeah. Just really cool.
Because it's all those things are like wrapping, right? The gift inside is you. It's your brilliance, right? So your brilliance is coming out, and it's coming through the expression of the wrapping around you, you know? And whether it's yoga or acupuncture or whatever it is, that's really what you're doing. You're lighting that up, and so that other people can receive it, which is really cool. And I think the other thing too is the important thing is that when we start to revere the past as like a simple time, a better time, a clearer time, it's, like I said, often because we're really in avoidance of what's happening in the present moment. And so it's like, okay, what am I here? Like, what am I doing in the present? Like, what's happening in the present moment that I can't be with? And then to ask the question, why can't I be with that? Like, what's here that's making it sticky for me, that I don't want to deal with, that I want to avoid? Because likely it's a distortion pattern that you're not addressing, that's getting louder and louder and louder for you to release the distortion pattern around. And once you do that, then your experience of the present becomes much more empowered and much more pleasurable, because you can be with whatever it is. And as your resonance rises even more, that's when you can start to really create manifest, right? So that's when it gets exciting.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about just this morning I was having a conversation with my brother on the phone, and he was like, I was just looking through old videos and like literally like reminiscing. There was like a sadness there, you know, and it's like that. And I get like that too. I'm like
Totally.
looking through old pictures. So when somebody's in that and they feel kind of stuck,
Yeah.
first of all, notice,
Yeah.
right? And then ask yourself, what is it that I'm missing in
Yeah.
the present? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have, because it's funny, I'm glad you brought that up. As humans, we tend to grieve the passage of things.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we all know, like the Buddhists have been saying for a long time, everything is temporary, right?
Yeah.
They've been saying this for like thousands of years.
Thousands,
now.
yeah.
Okay, right. They've been saying this, like everything is temporary, because it is. And so, but as humans, we're like, oh no, it's temporary.
Yeah.
You know, like we want to make it fixed. Like
Yes.
we want to like have that experience forever. And then we grieve the loss of that time.
Yes.
We grieve the loss of those relationships.
Or that thing.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be like, nostalgia is totally normal and human. So to notice that sadness for that time, you know, it's like, because it's about the loss of that time. Does that make sense? That it's no longer. That's the thing that we're grieving.
Right.
So to allow yourself to feel that sort of sadness, and then just let it wash through you.
Right.
It's like, oh, that time's different. And then what you can think of, if you get stuck there, notice if you get stuck. So the first thing is A, notice, get stuck.
Yes.
B, one thing to pull yourself out of that is, what am I grateful for right now?
Yes.
Like right now. Okay?
In this
present moment. I'm able to breathe really, I mean, even as like, can I breathe really deeply? I mean, that's pretty glorious, right? Or I can look at the sky and that's really beautiful, or I really love the dress I'm wearing, or whatever. It doesn't have to be anything like monumental, but that's what existence is. It's the details and the celebration of like the mundane. That's what makes life really magical. So if you feel your nostalgia for the past, feel gratitude then and celebration for the moment that you're in currently, and that will bring you back into the 0 point of space and time. Because remember, you're going to be back in the 0 point of space and time. What happens when people stay in that past moment of like, oh, you know, it used to be like this and blah, 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 they start to time distort back into the past. You don't want to stay there. That's bad. You want to come back into the present moment, because that's where you co-create your reality from. If you're always back here in nostalgia land and grief and like how it always used to be, or like some people do it negatively, like I was abused at this point in my life, and they live their life in that like state. I'm not saying abuse is okay. It's not. It's horrible. Okay,
Right.
so I'm not suggesting by any stretch that it's good. I'm just saying that if you stay there, in like age whatever when that abuse happened, then you actually are in a past distortion pattern where you stay disempowered, where you're giving your power away to the abuser, because you're not back here in the present moment where now you're rewriting your future.
Right.
Make sense?
Yes.
You don't want to give that person the power anymore. You got to come back here into the present moment, because this is where you start to change things, where you can release distortion patterns, where things in your future can start to change.
Yeah.
So
I'm
really
thinking
important.
about somebody that I know. She's in her maybe 60s or almost 70s, and she used to be in an all-girl band. And her whole life, since I've known her for 10 years plus, is living back in that, like I could have been famous, like that whole thing.
Right.
And never is present, never can appreciate. It's a very negative, actually a very negative life that she lives, just as an example.
Yeah.
And then I'm also thinking about, you're really describing like the season of autumn and the metal element, as I'm, I work with the elements.
Okay.
So you see, like, if you go back to, in your mind, what autumn is to you, right? The feeling of the crispness of the air, and the leaves are falling, the trees letting go. There's a natural letting go. And there is almost like a poignancy.
Yeah, like a melancholy.
Yes,
almost.
a subtle melancholy. And it's beautiful, though, at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a death, but it's an appreciation of what once was. Yeah. So I know people who can get stuck in that metal element, right?
Yeah.
And they're always in grief, and they're actually like weeping in their voice, and things are never,
Resolved.
Resolved. Exactly. So I think that's the main point that I'm hearing is, honor what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Appreciate the past. That nostalgia can be beautiful, but not to get stuck in it.
Yes. And to bring yourself back into the present moment.
Yes.
And release the distortion pattern that's causing you to want to go into the past. Don't distort into the past. So you have to deal with the time distortion, right? Because that can happen, right? It's like you're the woman you're talking about who's always in about the all-girl band, like what could have happened, whatever the expectations. I could have made it, but I didn't.
Where would I have been now?
Now, all that stuff. That's a huge time distortion. So she needs to be pulled into the present moment of time, and luckily with frequency work, that can happen. So that's really important. And also with regards to like spiritual stuff, is to take the things that resonate with you and carry them forward in the way that works best for you, right? So never to watch where you give your power away, right? To, some sage, some guru, some different time, some whatever and whatnot. Just watch where you're doing that and just check with yourself. Does this resonate with me? Can I learn from this? What can I do with this to accelerate forward? But not to just take it in carte blanche as if everything about that was amazing and therefore you have to take all of it in.
Right.
Because even it doesn't matter the tradition. There's the culture sometimes that they come from are rife with things like oppression against women, or caste systems, or slavery, or whatever was occurring at the time.
Hangings and killings
and stuff like this, right? That's embedded in the consciousness of that time. So when the teachings are there, yes, they may be of a high order. I'm not saying they're not necessarily. However, running through that is that consciousness level. So just to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And take, like I said,
not to
what
put
works.
everything up on a pedestal.
Exactly.
Yeah. Actually, going back to the metal element, there's, not to get too involved, I'm just seeing a correlation. There's organs associated with each element. So with metal and the autumn is the colon and the lungs. So the lungs take in and the colon releases. But we call the colon the diamond miner. So it's like you're extracting that last bit of jewel before you release.
Yeah.
Yeah. So same thing with those ancient traditions that we revere so highly.
Yeah.
Take what works for you and bring it into your current, right?
Yeah.
Your present.
Yeah, exactly.
And then make it yours.
Yours. Totally.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, really becoming the observer.
Yeah.
Of your own.
Yeah, and being aware of what is present for you. Always 0 point of space and time. 0 point of space and time. So for those of you who don't know what that is, 0 point of space is right here in the center of your body. Episode 97, watch about the rendering, Gia's favorite. Yes. And then also the 0 point of time is the present moment in linear time for people's reference. And if you are curious about time, episode 80, what is time, we'll teach you about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Karen. I think that sums it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're about to start the group frequency calibration, where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. To get to the GFC, click on the square that'll appear to the right or the link in the description below. Because I'm working on frequency level, GFCs are not like regular meditations. Many people go into a somewhat altered state, so please don't drive while listening to this. It's time to bring in a new experience, a new consciousness, and a new world. Let's rise together.